The $80 million lawsuit between Karoline Leavitt and Jasmine Crockett is not merely a legal proceeding, but rather a magnifying glass into the deeper currents of political power struggles in Congress. In the world of politics, lawsuits of such magnitude are never just about the money, they are about influence, about silencing opponents, and about controlling the narrative in the public eye. When a figure as prominent as Jasmine Crockett chooses to pursue such an enormous claim against Karoline Leavitt, the underlying message is one of dominance and intimidation. The amount itself, $80 million, is staggering, designed not just to seek restitution but to strike fear into the heart of a rival, and in turn, to send shockwaves throughout the halls of Congress. It reveals the way lawsuits can be weaponized as political tools, transforming legal systems into battlegrounds where reputations are attacked, careers are endangered, and futures are rewritten by the stroke of a gavel. At its core, this lawsuit represents the intensity of partisan battles and the willingness of leaders to use every possible avenue to gain leverage over one another. Congress has long been divided not just along ideological lines, but also in the strategies its members employ to weaken their adversaries. What makes this lawsuit particularly symbolic is how it transcends ordinary disagreements or heated debates. It shows how the stakes have risen to such heights that political survival now often involves the courts as much as it does the ballot box. For Karoline Leavitt, the lawsuit looms like an existential threat, not only to her finances but to her ability to stand as a credible political figure. For Jasmine Crockett, the pursuit of the lawsuit highlights her resolve to stand unyielding against an opponent, proving that in politics, mercy is rarely offered when power is at stake. The lawsuit also highlights how public perception is shaped by such high-profile conflicts. In the eyes of the public, an $80 million figure automatically carries with it assumptions of wrongdoing, negligence, or scandal. Even before the case is argued in any courtroom, the damage to reputation has already begun, with whispers and headlines fueling narratives that can overshadow years of political work. This becomes a powerful tactic in itself, because in politics, the court of public opinion often matters more than the court of law. By pressing forward with such a massive claim, Crockett ensures that Leavitt's name remains entangled in controversy, forcing her to constantly defend herself rather than proactively set her own agenda. In this sense, the lawsuit operates as a strategic weapon, shifting attention and creating distractions that weaken an opponent's ability to gain momentum. Furthermore, the lawsuit underscores how political disputes increasingly blur the line between personal vendettas and institutional responsibilities. While Congress is supposed to be a space where legislation, governance, and representation take precedence, moments like these reveal how personal conflicts spill over into the broader political stage. When a legal claim of this size makes headlines, it detracts from legislative focus and shifts energy into battles that are more about personal pride and political survival than the well-being of the people. Yet at the same time, these moments captivate the public, because they expose the human side of politics, where emotions, rivalries, and personal grudges intertwine with questions of policy and governance. The lawsuit between Crockett and Leavitt becomes less about justice in the traditional sense, and more about showcasing strength in the face of adversity, proving to allies and opponents alike who holds the upper hand. In many ways, the lawsuit can be seen as a test of political endurance. For Leavitt, it presents the challenge of navigating immense pressure while maintaining composure in the public sphere. Every statement she makes, every plea she voices, becomes part of the larger narrative, and her ability to withstand this storm will determine whether she emerges weakened or strengthened in the long term. For Crockett, the lawsuit is a demonstration of her willingness to stand firm and show no signs of compromise. Her determination signals to both her supporters and her rivals that she will not back down, even when confronted with immense political backlash. The balance of power is revealed not only in the courtroom but in how each side projects confidence, determination, and resilience under the public spotlight. The size of the lawsuit also calls attention to the growing role of money in politics. An $80 million claim is not something that can be ignored or brushed aside. It serves as a stark reminder of how financial threats can destabilize political figures, limiting their ability to campaign effectively, to build networks, or to maintain a reputation of stability and reliability. For members of Congress, money is both a lifeline and a liability. Fundraising powers careers, but financial liabilities can end them abruptly. By demanding such a staggering sum, the lawsuit not only threatens Leavitt's political standing but also highlights how financial warfare has become a significant extension of political rivalry. The symbolic weight of the lawsuit extends beyond the individuals involved, touching the institution of Congress itself. Every member watches closely, because the outcome sets precedents, not just legally but politically. If such lawsuits become more common, the culture of governance will be overshadowed by a culture of litigation, where fear of financial retaliation dictates the boundaries of debate. This has long-term implications for free speech within Congress, for the willingness of members to engage in bold political stances, and for the overall health of democratic discourse. When lawsuits become weapons, politics risks transforming into an arena dominated by fear rather than principle, and Congress into a space of silence rather than debate. The lawsuit between Karoline Leavitt and Jasmine Crockett thus stands as a defining moment that encapsulates the ruthless nature of political battles in modern America. It reflects how far individuals are willing to go to assert control, how money becomes intertwined with political dominance, and how public perception is leveraged in the fight for survival. It demonstrates that in today's Congress, struggles are no longer confined to votes on the floor or debates in committee rooms, but extend into the courts, the media, and the hearts of the American people who watch these dramas unfold with a mixture of fascination, shock, and disillusionment. This $80 million figure is not just about compensation or damages, it is about power, about shaping the battlefield of politics into one where the cost of opposition is so high that many may think twice before daring to challenge those who hold the upper hand. Karoline Leavitt's desperate plea to Jasmine Crockett to drop the $80 million lawsuit is more than a moment of political drama. It is a window into the vulnerability that even the most ambitious figures face in the ruthless world of politics. Leavitt, often portrayed as a strong and rising Republican voice, finds herself in a position where her survival seems to depend not on her policies, not on her speeches, and not even on her ability to connect with voters, but on the mercy of an opponent determined to hold her accountable through the courts. This plea is symbolic of the fragile balance every politician must navigate, where one misstep, one accusation, or one legal entanglement can spiral into a career-threatening crisis. Her desperation underscores the fact that no matter how bold or confident a politician may appear, the structures of law, media, and public perception can strip away their power and expose the raw human fear that lies beneath. The act of begging in politics is not a common image. Politicians are trained to project strength, authority, and unshakable confidence. Yet, in this case, Leavitt is forced to reveal weakness, to lower her defenses, and to ask for leniency in a forum where vulnerability is often weaponized. This moment shatters the carefully constructed image of political in. Her plea also highlights the immense pressure politicians face when embroiled in high-stakes legal battles. The lawsuit, with its massive $80 million figure, is more than just a legal inconvenience, it is a looming shadow over every aspect of her career. Such a lawsuit drains emotional energy, financial resources, and political capital. For Leavitt, asking Crockett to withdraw the case can be seen as an act of self-preservation, a last attempt to shield herself from total political ruin. In that moment, her words reflect not only her personal fear but also the broader fear that all politicians feel when confronted with forces beyond their control. It reminds us that politics is not simply about debating bills or winning elections, it is also about surviving the storms that threaten to erase years of work in a matter of moments. The plea also speaks to the dynamics of power between rivals. By begging, Leavitt acknowledges Crockett's upper hand in this conflict. It is an admission, whether intentional or not, that Crockett holds control over her fate, at least in this battle. In a world where control and dominance are everything, this gesture flips the usual script of politics. Instead of wielding influence, Leavitt is placed in the vulnerable position of seeking mercy. It creates an imbalance that magnifies Crockett's authority and forces observers to consider how quickly power can shift in the political arena. One day, a politician may appear unshakable, commanding attention with speeches and confident gestures, but the next, they may be reduced to pleading for reprieve, their entire career hanging by a thread. Leavitt's plea also reveals the emotional toll that lawsuits of this magnitude can have on individuals. Behind the cameras, beyond the headlines, there exists the reality of sleepless nights, endless consultations with lawyers, and the constant anxiety of not knowing what the future holds. For a public figure like Leavitt, who must continue to appear composed and persuasive in front of cameras, this pressure becomes unbearable. Her willingness to beg in such a public way demonstrates just how desperate she has become, and how deeply the lawsuit has shaken her foundation. It also humanizes her, because it shows that beneath the polished speeches and political strategies, there is a person grappling with fear, uncertainty, and the possibility of losing everything she has worked for. The desperation in her plea also underscores the high cost of political ambition. To climb the ladder of power requires sacrifices, resilience, and a thick skin, but even the most determined politicians are not immune to collapse when the weight becomes too heavy. Leavitt's situation reflects the precarious nature of political success, where one moment of vulnerability can overshadow years of achievement. Her plea reminds both her supporters and critics that politicians, regardless of their confidence, are constantly navigating the razor's edge between triumph. The plea also resonates because of how it reflects broader themes of forgiveness, mercy, and justice. In a society often hungry for accountability, Crockett's lawsuit becomes a symbol of holding the powerful to task, while Leavitt's plea embodies the human instinct to seek forgiveness and escape punishment. It forces observers to ask difficult questions about what justice should look like in politics. Should rivals show mercy when they hold the advantage, or should they press forward without compromise? Should vulnerability be respected, or should it be exploited as a weakness? Leavitt's plea brings these ethical dilemmas to the forefront, making the conflict not just a legal battle, but a reflection of the values and expectations we hold for those in power. This moment of desperation also reveals the broader culture of fear within Congress. Politicians operate in an environment where one mistake, one scandal, or one lawsuit can be used against them with devastating effect. The plea captures the underlying anxiety of an entire institution, where many know that they, too, could find themselves in a similar position if circumstances turned against them. Leavitt's public vulnerability becomes a mirror, reflecting the silent fears of her colleagues who watch her plight with a mix of sympathy, judgment, and perhaps even relief that it is not them in the hot seat. Leavitt's desperate plea to Crockett therefore represents far more than a personal moment of weakness. It reveals the hidden side of politics, where vulnerability coexists with ambition, where fear undermines confidence, and where the desperate search for mercy collides with the relentless pursuit of power. It demonstrates how quickly the balance can shift, how one individual's fate can become entangled with another's decisions, and how the human need for survival breaks through even the most carefully guarded political image. Through this plea, we see the cost of political ambition laid bare, exposing the fragility of those who dare to step into the harshest spotlight of all. Jasmine Crockett's cold response to Karoline Leavitt's plea to drop the $80 million lawsuit reverberated through Congress like a thunderclap, leaving members stunned and the public riveted. In a space where negotiation, compromise, and strategic half-measures are often the norm, Crockett's refusal to show even a hint of leniency revealed both her determination and her unflinching approach to conflict. The chill in her words reflected not only a personal resolve but also a larger political message, that weakness would not be rewarded, and that accountability, at least in her eyes, would not be avoided through desperate pleas. This response disrupted the expectation that behind-the-scenes bargaining might soften the edges of such confrontations. Instead, Crockett demonstrated that in today's political arena, coldness can be a calculated form of strength, one that leaves opponents scrambling and colleagues uneasy. Her response shocked Congress precisely because it broke the traditional rhythm of political theater. Lawmakers are used to fiery speeches, heated debates, and even aggressive posturing, but most understand the necessity of tempering hostility with gestures of cooperation. Crockett's coldness, however, was absolute. She did not bend, she did not suggest compromise, and she did not offer Leavitt a path to redemption. This level of firmness unsettled many because it shattered the illusion that civility always has a place in congressional disputes. It reminded everyone watching that politics can be brutal, unforgiving, and entirely devoid of sentiment when the stakes are this high. The shock was not just in the lawsuit itself, but in the realization that Crockett's icy tone might mark a shift toward an even harsher political culture in which mercy has no seat at the table. The coldness of Crockett's response also amplified her image as a formidable figure unwilling to be swayed by emotion. By denying Leavitt's plea so bluntly, she carved out an identity that commands both fear and respect. For her supporters, this made her a symbol of unwavering conviction, someone unwilling to let her opponents escape accountability. For her critics, it made her appear ruthless, more interested in crushing a rival than in fostering any sense of fairness or balance. Either way, the response ensured that Crockett's words would echo far beyond that moment, shaping how she would be perceived not only within Congress but across the nation. In politics, image is often as powerful as policy, and Crockett's cold dismissal crystallized her as a leader who does not flinch under pressure. The shockwaves within Congress stemmed not only from Crockett's refusal but from the implications it carried for the culture of the institution itself. If members take her stance as an example, then the days of behind-the-scenes deals and quiet compromises may dwindle further. A cold response to vulnerability sets a precedent, signaling to others that showing no mercy is a viable strategy. This can create a ripple effect, encouraging more lawmakers to adopt similarly unforgiving tactics. Over time, the institution may become less about negotiation and more about confrontation, with members constantly on guard against revealing any weakness. Crockett's response thus becomes symbolic of a broader transformation in congressional politics, where the calculus shifts from compromise to domination. Her coldness also highlights the gendered dimensions of political perception. Female politicians are often judged more harshly when they show firmness or a lack of sympathy, yet Crockett's response pushed against these stereotypes. By choosing not to cushion her rejection with politeness, she defied the expectation that women in politics must balance toughness with warmth. This act not only shocked her colleagues but also challenged the way society views women in positions of power. To some, her response seemed harsh; to others, it was a necessary demonstration that women can wield authority as bluntly and unapologetically as men. This moment therefore transcended the personal conflict with Leavitt and entered into a larger conversation about gender, power, and the shifting standards of leadership. The impact of Crockett's cold response also extended into the realm of public opinion. For those watching from outside Congress, the starkness of her rejection underscored the drama of the lawsuit and elevated it into a national spectacle. Supporters rallied behind her resolve, praising her for refusing to give in to what they saw as political theatrics from Leavitt. Critics, however, argued that the coldness betrayed a lack of empathy and turned politics into a blood sport. Regardless of interpretation, the intensity of reactions ensured that the moment would dominate headlines and social media feeds, fueling debates about justice, fairness, and the future of political discourse. Crockett's words became more than a personal response; they became a cultural flashpoint in the broader narrative of American politics. Her response also served as a strategic maneuver. By remaining cold and unmoved, Crockett avoided opening any doors for negotiation that could weaken her position. In politics, showing even a small degree of softness can be interpreted as an invitation for compromise. Crockett's coldness ensured that no such interpretation was possible. She maintained complete control of the narrative, leaving Leavitt cornered and with no leverage. This tactical clarity is part of what shocked Congress so deeply, the realization that Crockett was not only rejecting the plea but also setting the terms of the entire conflict. She dictated the tone, the pace, and the parameters of the battle, leaving her rival with no room to maneuver. The ripple effects of Crockett's response also highlighted the fragile nature of political alliances. Members of Congress often rely on each other for support, even across party lines, but a moment like this reminded everyone that loyalty is conditional and fleeting. Crockett's coldness sent a warning signal to others that mercy should not be expected in times of weakness. This made colleagues rethink their own positions, alliances, and vulnerabilities. If Crockett could dismiss Leavitt so completely, what might she do to others who crossed her? The coldness became not just a personal act but an institutional warning, reshaping how colleagues interact with one another and recalibrating the balance of power within congressional networks. At its core, Crockett's response demonstrated how politics often thrives on spectacle as much as substance. The lawsuit itself was already sensational, but the cold rejection elevated it into a defining moment. Theatrics matter in politics because they capture public imagination, and Crockett's coldness turned a legal battle into a dramatic storyline.